The void crackled with an unseen energy, a tremor in the fabric of space itself, as Captain Harkan of the freighter Void Wanderer stared at his sensor array near the forbidden Xylos quarantine zone. "That ain't no solar flare," he muttered, his voice a low rumble in the cockpit. "And that ain't no calm ghost." A cold, synthesized voice suddenly cut through his ship's speakers, overriding all channels. "Unidentified vessel, you are violating Kryll Hegemony restricted space. Divert course immediately or face terminal sanction." Harkan cursed, his hand already yanking the hyperdrive controls, but not before his long-range scanners caught a fleeting, impossible image, a silhouette against the distant nebulae, vast and serpentine, like a dragon carved from shadows and starlight, briefly eclipsing a cluster of stars. It was a legend whispered only in the darkest corners of the galaxy, a guardian of secrets and silencer of hope, a chilling prelude to the chaos Kaelen Vance was about to stumble into. Kaelen Vance, known in the grimy underbellies of a dozen star systems simply as Kael, preferred shadows to spotlights, information to blaster fire. He moved through the quarantined archaeological dig site on Xylos VII with the practiced ease of a ghost, his gray, utility jumpsuit blending seamlessly with the metallic corridors and dust-choked excavation chambers. This wasn't his usual jig, trading whispered secrets in smoky cantinas for credits. This was a high-stakes extraction, brokered by an anonymous client with deep pockets and even deeper paranoia. The Kryll Hegemony, rulers of this sector with an iron fist and a velvet glove of propaganda, had this site locked down tighter than a neutron star's core. They claimed it was an unstable archaeological find, prone to releasing ancient pathogens. Kael, though with his knack for unconventional thinking and access to schematics most believed didn't exist, knew better. The Kryll didn't quarantine things because they were dangerous to health. They quarantined them because they were dangerous to their control. His analytical mind processed the layout, the guard patrols he'd meticulously mapped via backdoored surveillance feeds, the subtle hum of the power conduits beneath his feet. He was looking for Containment Unit 7, designated target. The air was stale, thick with the scent of disturbed earth, and something else to a faint, almost floral aroma, oddly out of place in this sterile metallic tomb. He paused, listening. Nothing but the distant thrum of the quarantine field generators. He was close. Unit 7 was less a cell and more a transparent plasteel cylinder set in the center of a wider observation chamber. Inside, bathed in a soft, analytical blue light, was the package. A female humanoid, but distinctly alien. Her skin possessed an ethereal, opalescent quality, with subtle, intricate patterns like the grain of ancient wood or the delicate veining of a leaf, shifting faintly in the light. Her hair, a cascade of what looked like deep violet, almost black, woven fronds, framed a face with high cheekbones and large, luminous eyes that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. She was slender, but there was an undeniable resilience in her posture, even as she sat, perfectly still, on a low bench. A Floran, Kael guessed from the sparse intel he'd received, a species rumored to be nearly extinct, or perhaps just very good at hiding. As Kael bypassed the door lock with a series of precise, silent movements using a custom interface tool, the Floran's head tilted slightly, her large eyes focusing on him with an unnerving intensity. There was no fear in them, only a profound, searching curiosity. He stepped inside, the door hissing shut behind him. "I'm Kael," he said, his voice low. "I'm getting you out of here." She didn't respond verbally. Instead, she rose, her movements fluid and graceful, almost disconcertingly so. She mimicked his stance almost perfectly for a fleeting second, the slight lean, the way he held his hands, then it was gone. A flicker of her cultural chameleon ability, a hint of the mimicry that was almost instinctual. Her gaze swept over him, analytical and swift, then around the small chamber, as if reassessing her cage now that an external variable had been introduced. Kael felt a strange prickle on his skin, not of danger, but of being understood on a level deeper than words. This was going to be more complicated than just a snatch and grab. The faint floral scent was stronger now, emanating from her, a clean, earthy perfume that was surprisingly pleasant amidst the reek of confinement. "We need to move. Kryll patrols are on a 70-minute rotation in this sector. We missed the last one by 5, Kael stated, his analytical mind already calculating escape routes and contingencies. He offered her a hand. She looked at his outstretched hand, then back at his face. A small, almost imperceptible frown creased her brow, not of displeasure, but perhaps confusion or intense concentration. Then, In a voice that was surprisingly melodic, yet with a faint, crystalline echo, she spoke. Kryll. The word was a perfect imitation of the hegemony officers he'd heard on comms, the intonation, the slight sibilance, flawless. It was both astonishing and deeply unsettling. Yeah, Kryll. Kael confirmed, trying to keep the surprise from his voice. And they're not known for their hospitality. Let's go. He gestured towards the door. She followed, her movements silent, her awareness of her surroundings almost palpable. Kael had a feeling this package was far more than he'd bargained for. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor, pairing an underworld informant who thrived on predictable data with an alien who was a walking enigma. Their escape from the primary dig site was a tense ballad of stealth and precise timing. Kael's unconventional thinking led them through maintenance tunnels and forgotten service shafts, bypassing sensor grids and guard posts. Lyra, as he learned her name was a name she'd offered in a soft, breathy whisper after mimicking his own name back to him with eerie precision, moved with an almost supernatural grace. Her proprioception sensitivity was immediately apparent. She'd pause, head tilted before rounding a corner, her hand sometimes brushing the wall as if tasting its vibrations. Once, she pulled him back just as a heavy security door began to cycle open on the other side of a junction, her eyes wide, not with fear, but with the preternatural awareness of the impending structural shift and the movement beyond. She disliked the chaotic clatter of loose debris in one tunnel, her brow furrowing, a faint shimmer passing over her patterned skin, until they were through it. How did you know that door was going to open? Kael asked in a hushed tone after they were clear, adrenaline still thrumming through him. Lyra looked at the wall she had touched. The air it pushed before the metal complained. She said, her grasp of his language surprisingly advanced, though her sentence structure was sometimes unusual. The floor it sighed. Kael, the analytical informant, filed this away. She could feel minute changes in air pressure, structural stresses, invaluable, and terrifyingly alien. His attempts to remain detached and professional were already fraying. There was a vulnerability about her. Despite her strange abilities, the way she'd flinch at sudden loud noises, the slight tremor in her hands when the environment became too sensorially overwhelming. Their extraction point was a derelict or hauler, the rust bucket, hidden in a cluster of asteroids on the edge of the Xylos system, arranged by Kael's shadowy client. The pilot, a gruff Twi'lek named Grish, was already nervous. Took you long enough, Vance? Kryll patrols are thicker than flies on a bantha carcass out here. As they blasted off, alarms suddenly blared on the rust bucket's bridge. Kryll destroyers? Grish yelled, his lecu twitching. They found us? Two sleek, obsidian Kryll cruisers arrowed towards them, weapons charging. Kael's stomach lurched. This wasn't just a standard patrol. This was a dedicated pursuit. Someone important knew Lyra was gone. Strap in. Grish bellowed, yanking the controls. The small hauler, never designed for agile combat maneuvers, bucked and groaned under the strain of evasive action. Lasers stitched across space, narrowly missing them. Kael, used to back alleys, not dogfights, gripped his seat, his knuckles white. He glanced at Lyra. She was completely still, her eyes closed, the intricate patterns on her skin subtly shifting, almost glowing faintly in the dim emergency lights. She wasn't panicking. She was adapting. Her species' natural tolerance for extreme G-forces was kicking in. While Kael felt his insides trying to rearrange themselves, Lyra looked almost serene, a small, almost imperceptible smile on her lips as Grish threw the ship into a particularly violent corkscrew maneuver that slammed Kael against his restraints. They're locking on, Grish shouted. Hyperdrive is still spooling. Suddenly, Lyra's eyes snapped open. She pointed towards a dense, roiling nebula to their port. There, she said, her voice calm but firm. The currents are chaotic, unstable. They will not follow deeply. Kael looked at Grish. The Twi'lek was sweating. That's the Serpent's Coal Nebula! It's a ship graveyard, full of gravitic anomalies and radiation pockets. Better than Kryll plasma, Kael bit out, his analytical mind weighing the probabilities. Can you navigate it? Lyra spoke again, her voice carrying a strange resonance. I can feel the safe paths, the stable flows, where the structure of space is less torn. Grish hesitated for a split second, then snarled, Kid, if you get us killed, I'm haunting your ghost. He wrenched the controls, and the rust bucket plunged into the swirling, multi-hued chaos of the Serpent's coil. The journey through the nebula was a nightmare of turbulence, and near misses with floating debris and crackling energy fields. Alarms shrieked, consoles sparked, and the ship groaned like a dying beast. Kael was thrown around like a rag doll, his analytical mind struggling to keep up with the sheer unpredictability. But Lyra, seated beside him, became their unlikely navigator. Her eyes, now glowing with a soft, internal luminescence, scanned the chaotic vista outside. She'd issue quiet commands, left, sharply. Now hold. There is a quiet pocket ahead, a breath in the storm. Her voice a strange counterpoint to Grish's panic cursing and the ship's protests. Her proprioception was working on a cosmic scale, sensing the warp and weft of spacetime itself. Kael watched her, astounded. She wasn't just tolerating the G-forces, she seemed to flow with them. Then disaster. A particularly violent gravitic shear caught them. The ship screamed, metal tore, and the main engines sputtered and died. They were thrown into a wild spin, alarms blaring a symphony of doom. Lost primary power? Grish yelled over the den. Auxiliary is failing? We're going down. Kael saw it on the main viewer, a small, rocky asteroid, appearing suddenly out of the nebula's murk, growing rapidly larger. Impact was inevitable. Brace, he yelled, the word torn from his throat. The crash was brutal. Metal shrieked, systems exploded, and darkness consumed them. Kael woke to a throbbing headache and the acrid smell of burned electronics. The rust bucket's cockpit was a wreck, emergency lights casting long, dancing shadows. Grish was slumped over the controls, unmoving. A quick, grim check confirmed the worst. The Twi'lek was gone. Kael swallowed, a cold knot forming in his stomach. He'd known the risks, but death was always a harsh reality. He unstrapped himself, his body aching. Lyra, he called out, his voice hoarse. A soft groan answered him from the back of the small cockpit. He found her wedged between a buckled bulkhead and a shattered console. She was conscious, but her eyes were unfocused, and one of her arms was bent at an unnatural angle. The delicate patterns on her skin were muted, almost gray. Are you all right? He asked, kneeling beside her, his usual analytical detachment replaced by a raw concern that surprised him. She winced, trying to move her injured arm. Broken, she whispered, her voice faint. Theth's structure failed. She was referring to her own bone. Kael's mind raced. They were stranded on an unknown asteroid, deep within a hazardous nebula, with Kryll patrols likely still searching the periphery. Their ship was a write-off, and Lyra was injured. The immediate consequence of their escape was stark. They were alone, vulnerable, and hunted. We need to get out of the ship, Kael said, his voice regaining some of its customary firmness. It's unstable. Could be leaking radiation. He gently helped her up, supporting her weight. She was lighter than she looked, but her resilience was astonishing. Despite the pain that was clearly visible in her eyes, she moved with his assistance, her uninjured hand instinctively going to the bulkhead, feeling its groaning protests. They salvaged what they could: a medkit, emergency rations, a water reclaimer, a distress beacon useless this deep in the nebula, and Kael's personal toolkit and sidearm. The asteroid was small, barren, and airless. They found a shallow cave, barely more than an overhang, that offered some protection from the nebula's swirling radiation and mycometeoroids. The next few hours were a blur of survival. Kael, using the medkit, managed to set and splint Lyra's arm. His hands, usually so steady when disarming a complex security system or analyzing data streams, felt clumsy and oversized as he tended to her injury. He found himself acutely aware of her proximity, the faint floral scent of her skin, the soft sound of her breathing. He was, to his own surprise, flustered. This wasn't a data point, this was a person, an alien person, who was depending on him. Thank you. Lyra murmured, her eyes clearer now, watching him as he secured the splint. The patterns on her skin had regained some of their subtle luminosity. Don't mention it, Kael replied, trying for a casual tone that didn't quite land. We're in this together. As the initial adrenaline wore off, the full weight of their situation pressed down on them. They were trapped. Their only hope was rescue, but who would be looking for them? Kael's anonymous client was unlikely to mount a recovery mission into the Serpent's coil. The Kryll were looking for them, but not to rescue them. It was Lyra who broke the heavy silence. We must speak, she said, her gaze intense. Understand. Kryll will find this broken shell. She gestured vaguely towards the wreckage of the rust bucket. They will search. Kael nodded. You're right. If we're going to survive, if we're going to figure out a way out of this mess, we need to be able to communicate properly. Your grasp of my language is incredible, but There are gaps, and I don't understand a word of yours. Lyra looked at him, a thoughtful expression on her face. My people, Florans, we learn quickly. Mirror. Adapt, it is how we survived. But true speaking, it is more than words. She touched her chest lightly. It is from here. And so began their turning point, born of desperation and forced proximity. In the dim, confined space of their makeshift shelter, surrounded by the eerie, silent dance of the nebula's gases outside their viewport, they embarked on the arduous task of learning each other's languages. Kael, the analytical thinker, tried to approach it systematically. He'd point to objects, rock, tool, stars. Lyra would repeat the words, her pronunciation almost instantly perfect. Then she would respond in her own language, a complex tapestry of soft clicks, resonating hums, and subtle shifts in the bioluminescent patterns on her skin. Her hands would make intricate gestures, like a conductor leading an invisible orchestra. For Kael, it was like trying to decipher a living symphony. The clicks had pitch and rhythm. The hums vibrated at different frequencies he could barely discern. The light patterns shifted in color and intensity, forming complex, flowing symbols. He fumbled, mispronounced, misinterpreted. His attempts at her clicks sounded like someone choking. His gestures were clumsy approximations. Lyra was patient, though sometimes a flicker of something Kael couldn't quite interpret. Amusement, frustration, would cross her face. She'd correct him gently, repeating a sound or a pattern slowly, her own skin glowing softly as if to emphasize the meaning. He learned that a certain sequence of soft blue pulses meant safety, while a rapid, sharp red flicker indicated danger or warning. A low, resonant hum, almost a purr, accompanied by a warm, amber glow, meant understanding or agreement. His analytical mind, however, began to find patterns. He started to associate certain light shifts with emotional states, certain clicks with core concepts. He realized her proprioception was tied to her communication, the way she subtly shifted her weight, or angled her head added layers of meaning. Meanwhile, Lyra absorbed his language with astonishing speed, but she struggled with idioms, sarcasm, and the emotional nuances that lay beneath the surface of words. Why do you say break a leg when you mean good luck? She asked once, her brow furrowed in genuine confusion. It seems counterproductive to wish for structural failure in a limb. Kael, trying to explain, found himself tongue-tied, acutely aware of her logical, literal interpretation. It's an expression. It means well, it's complicated. He felt a blush creep up his neck, another instance of being flustered by her directness. Their lessons were punctuated by the harsh realities of their situation. Kryll search drones periodically swept the edges of the nebula, their sensor beams like searching fingers. Each time, they'd douse their minimal lights, huddle in silence. Kael's hand instinctively hovering near his blaster, Lyra becoming utterly still, her skin patterns dimming to blend with the shadows, her breathing almost ceasing. The shared fear, the enforced stillness, forged a strange intimacy between them. During one such tense waiting period, Lyra, sensing Kael's anxiety, began to emit a very soft, pulsing blue light from her uninjured hand, accompanied by a barely audible, rhythmic hum. It was a pattern he was beginning to associate with calm or peace. He found to his surprise that it did soothe his frayed nerves. He looked at her, at the gentle light playing on her alien features, and felt a connection that transcended words, a nascent understanding that went deeper than grammar and vocabulary. The Kryll were definitely intensifying their search. One drone came dangerously close, its sensors sweeping directly over their hiding spot. Lyra tensed, her own light patterns extinguished instantly. Kael held his breath. For long minutes, there was only the sound of their hearts beating in the suffocating silence. The drone eventually moved on, but the incident underscored their precariousness. They are persistent, Lyra stated softly once the danger had passed. The patterns on her skin swirled with a troubled violet light. They want what I know. Or what I am. What is that, Lyra? Kael asked gently, the question that had been burning in his mind since he'd seen her mimicry. What makes you so important to them? She looked away, towards the swirling colors of the nebula. My people, we were versatile. We could understand others. Become like them, to bridge understanding. The Kryll, they see it as a tool, a weapon. She paused, then her gaze returned to him, sharp and clear. They were trying to force me to use the Kashal, the spirit mask, the mask of 1,000 faces, to serve their expansion, to infiltrate and deceive. Kael's mind reeled. The mask of 1,000 faces. He'd heard whispers of it in the deepest, most shadowed corners of the underworld, a legendary ability, not an artifact, allowing perfect mimicry, not just of voice and mannerism, but of thought patterns, even subtle biological cues. It was the ultimate infiltrator's tool. If Lyra possessed this, or the potential for it, she wasn't just a refugee, she was a strategic asset of galactic importance. And the Kryll wouldn't stop until they had her back, or silenced her permanently. Their forced cooperation had just become a fight for something far larger than their own survival. Days blurred into a routine of shared hardship, whispered conversations, and slow, painstaking language lessons under the constant threat of discovery. The asteroid offered little beyond shelter. Their rations dwindled. The water reclaimer struggled with the trace amounts of ice Kael managed to chip from shadowed crevices. Yet, through this crucible of deprivation and fear, something vital began to grow between Kael and Lyra. Trust. Kael, the pragmatic informant, found himself sharing stories of his past, of the winding, often morally gray path that had led him to Xylos VII. He spoke of his unconventional methods, born from a need to see patterns others missed, to connect disparate pieces of information. He confessed, in a rare moment of vulnerability, his discomfort with direct emotional confrontation, how he preferred the logic of data to the unpredictability of feelings. Lyra listened, her luminous eyes fixed on him, her skin sometimes shimmering with soft, empathetic colors he was slowly learning to interpret. She never judged, only absorbed. In turn, Lyra revealed more about the Florans. They were an ancient race, deeply connected to the natural rhythms of the universe. Their biology intertwined with the worlds they inhabited. Their proprioception wasn't just a physical sense, it was a form of empathy with their environment, allowing them to feel the life, or distress, of a place. Their dislike of chaotic environments, she explained, stemmed from this sensitivity. Too much discordant sensory information was physically painful, like a constant, grating noise. Extreme G-force tolerance was a legacy of their ancestral home, a world with a wildly fluctuating gravitational field. She spoke of the Kashal, the mask of 1,000 faces. It wasn't just mimicry, she explained, her voice soft but earnest, her hands shaping unseen forms in the air. It was a deep communion, an understanding so profound that the Floran could temporarily embody the essence of another, to see the universe through their senses, understand their deepest motivations. It is a bridge, Kael, she said, her eyes shining with a violet light, not a weapon. The Kryll corrupted its purpose. They sought to make us echoes, not empathic voices. She confessed her fear that the Kryll had succeeded in twisting this ability in others of her kind, if any still survived in their clutches. Kael's analytical mind was captivated, but it was his heart, a part of him he usually kept carefully guarded, that was truly moved. He saw not an alien, but a being of profound depth and resilience, burdened by a gift that others sought to exploit. His flustered reactions to her direct emotional honesty or her alien beauty began to morph into a protective tenderness. When she shivered from the asteroid's chill, he found himself instinctively moving to shield her, sharing his thermal blanket without a second thought. When she struggled to open a stubborn ration pack with her injured arm, his hands were there, gentle and efficient. One night, a period of relative darkness as their asteroid rotated away from the brightest part of the nebula, Lyra was tending to a small, phosphorescent fungus Kael had found growing in a fissure. It was their only source of natural light beyond the emergency lamps. Her uninjured hand hovered over it, and the fungus seemed to pulse with a brighter, healthier glow. "You're helping it?" Kael asked, fascinated. Lyra nodded. "It is weak, frightened by the shaking of the rock. I offer calm." A soft green light emanated from her palm, bathing the fungus. "Things have a structure, a rhythm, even small live." He watched her, the way the gentle light from her hand illuminated the intricate patterns on her skin, the serene concentration on her face. He saw not just an alien, but a being profoundly connected to life, in stark contrast to the sterile, controlling dogma of the Kryll. A wave of protectiveness, so strong it almost buckled his knees, washed over him. He wanted to shield her from the Kryll, from anyone who would try to use or harm her. The romantic tension, unspoken yet palpable, thickened the air in their small cave. Shared glances lingered a moment too long. Accidental touches sent sparks through Kael, making his breath catch. He found himself cataloging the subtle shifts in her bioluminescent patterns, learning them like a new, intimate language. A soft, rose-gold shimmer when she was pleased, a deep indigo when she was lost in thought, a vibrant, almost painful crimson when she recounted the Kryll's cruelty. Their break, when it came, was not from rescue, but from Kael's unconventional thinking. He'd been studying the wreckage of the rust bucket during their brief, risky forays outside the cave. The ship's long-range comm array was shattered, but a smaller, secondary transponder, designed for proximity alerts, was surprisingly intact. Its power cell was dead, but Kael, ever the improviser, realized the phosphorescent fungus Lyra tended wasn't just producing light, it was generating a tiny, bioelectric charge. "It's a long shot," he said, his voice tight with a mixture of hope and trepidation, showing Lyra the transponder and a fistful of the glowing fungi. "But if I can rig these to generate enough power for a single, directed burst, maybe we can piggyback a signal onto one of the Kryll drone communication frequencies." Not a distress call, they'd trace that instantly, but a data packet, something they wouldn't immediately recognize as hostile. Lyra's eyes widened. "A message, hidden in their own voice." "Exactly," Kael said, a grim smile touching his lips. "We need to send something to my client. Proof of life, and a warning about how badly they underestimated the Kryll's interest in you." It took 2 precious days of meticulous work, Kael's fingers painstakingly rewiring the transponder with makeshift tools, Lyra carefully cultivating the fungi to maximize their energy output, her touch coaxing them to glow brighter, stronger. Her proprioception helped him locate the most stable frequencies the drones used, feeling the subtle vibrations in the ether. They worked side by side, their proximity no longer awkward, but comfortable, necessary. He became acutely aware of the unique, earthy scent of her, a fragrance he now associated with safety and a strange, burgeoning hope. The stakes escalated dramatically when a Kryll corvette, larger and more heavily armed than the cruisers, entered the nebula, conducting a more thorough, grid-by-grid search. Its powerful sensors swept dangerously close. They were running out of time. "It's now or never," Kael muttered, his face pale in the dim light of the cave. He held the modified transponder, a crude antenna fashioned from salvage wire pointing towards the nebula's edge. Lyra stood beside him, her injured arm still in its splint, but her uninjured hand resting lightly on his shoulder. Her touch was grounding, her presence a silent reassurance. The patterns on her skin pulsed with a steady, determined blue. "The currents are strong now," she whispered, her eyes focused on some distant point Kael couldn't see. A clear channel for a moment. Kael took a deep breath. He activated the transponder. The fungi flared with an intense, almost blinding light, then dimmed, their energy expended. A single, almost imperceptible click emanated from the device. For a long moment nothing happened. Then Kael's old, battered datapad, which he'd slaved to the transponder to monitor for any outgoing signal, beeped softly. A tiny icon indicated message sent, awaiting confirmation. They waited. Nerves stretched taut. Minutes crawled by like hours. The Kryll corvette drew closer. Kael could almost feel its oppressive presence. Then, another beep. Confirmation received. Package Alpha. Standby for retasking. Kael stared at the datapad, his mind struggling to process it. Retasking. What did that mean? Before he could voice his confusion, the datapad screen flickered and an encrypted message began to decode. It was from his client, or rather, an intermediary he'd never interacted with directly before. Vance. Floran confirmed. Asset value significantly increased. Original extraction parameters void. New objective: deliver Floran and acquired data to designated contact, subsector Epsilon 9, Corsair's Nebula. High risk, high reward. Kryll have deployed the Void Serpent to blockade primary routes. You are on your own for transit. The data Lyra carries, or rather, is as vital. It's a message of hope for worlds suffocating under Kryll mental conditioning. Failure is not an option. Kael's blood ran cold. The Void Serpent. The legendary Kryll dreadnought, the enforcer of their psychic tyranny, the very same impossible silhouette Captain Harkan had glimpsed. He looked at Lyra. Her eyes were wide, the patterns on her skin swirling with a storm of emerald and violet. She understood. They weren't just escaping anymore. They were now couriers of a rebellion, hunted by a monster of myth. Acquired data. Kael breathed, looking at Lyra. What data? Lyra touched her temple. The Kryll, they forced me to interface with their central archives at the dig site. They thought I could unlock older systems. I saw things, not just about my people, but about their control, the conditioning protocols, the psychological weapons, and a weakness. A resonance, a song that could break it. Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with a terrible awe. I did not know I retained it so clearly. It is part of me now. The message of hope wasn't just information. It was a living code embedded within Lyra's memory, a counterfrequency to the Kryll's oppression, and the Void Serpent was deployed to stop them. The stakes had just become astronomically high. Kael felt a tremor of fear, but also a surge of something else, grim determination. He looked at Lyra, at the courage shining in her luminous eyes, the quiet strength that had weathered captivity, and a crash landing. He thought of the Kashal, the mask of 1,000 faces, not as a weapon, but as the bridge she believed it to be. Subsector Epsilon 9, Kael said, his voice firm. Corsair's Nebula. Do you know it? Lyra nodded slowly. It is far, and treacherous, but not impossible. Then we find a way, Kael stated. He reached out, his fingers brushing hers. This time, there was no hesitation, no flustered retreat, only a shared resolve. Her skin felt warm, vibrant, and for the first time, he felt the subtle thrum of her own bioluminescent energy, a comforting, steady pulse. In that moment, surrounded by danger and uncertainty, their connection deepened, forged in the fires of shared adversity and a dawning, unspoken affection. He was no longer just an informant, he was her protector, her partner. And she, the package, was becoming his everything. Their retasking came with a sliver of hope. The client's message included encrypted coordinates for a hidden cache within the Serpent's coil, left by other operatives long ago. It contained a small, outdated but functional scout ship. The Starhopper. Getting to it was another ordeal. They had to traverse a treacherous asteroid field, Kael relying on Lyra's incredible proprioception to guide them through shifting rock and gravitational anomalies. She would close her eyes, her head tilted, her hand outstretched as if reading the very fabric of space, murmuring directions like, left Kael. There is a void whisper there. A passage. The large rock ahead, it groans. Unstable. During one perilous crossing, a cascade of smaller asteroids threatened to crush them. Kael, moving to shield Lyra, found himself pressed against her, the thin fabric of their suits the only barrier. He felt the rapid, rhythmic pulse of her bioluminescence against his chest, a warm, rose-gold light. Her alien scent, earthy and floral, filled his helmet. For a moment, amidst the chaos, time seemed to stop. He looked down at her. Her large eyes, wide and luminous, met his. In their depths, he saw not fear, but a reflection of his own fierce protectiveness, and something more, something tender and questioning. He felt his carefully constructed emotional walls crumble. Lyra, he whispered, his voice thick. Before he could articulate the storm of emotions, a larger asteroid scraped past, showering them with ice crystals. The moment was broken, but not lost. The unspoken words hung in the vacuum between them, a promise. They reached the Starhopper, a battered but space-worthy vessel. Its systems were archaic, its comforts non-existent, but it had an engine and a hyperdrive. As Kael worked to bring its systems online, Lyra watched, her presence a quiet support. She had started to anticipate his needs, handing him tools before he asked. Her movements fluid and precise despite her still healing arm. Her cultural chameleon ability, Kael realized, wasn't just mimicry, it was a profound capacity for empathy and understanding, allowing her to adapt and assist in ways that were almost intuitive. Once they were underway, navigating the treacherous currents out of the Serpent's coil and into the relative quiet of deep space, the forced intimacy of the small scout ship amplified their growing connection. They shared meager meals, huddled together for warmth against the chill of the aging life support, and continued their language lessons, which now felt less like a necessity and more like a shared journey of discovery. Kael found himself fascinated by the nuances of Floran expression he was learning through Lyra. A particular flutter of her leaf-like eyelashes that meant amusement. A subtle tensing of the delicate, frond like filaments of her hair that indicated deep thought. The way the patterns on her skin would flow like water when she was recounting a memory, or sharpen into crystalline formations when she was focused. He, in turn, found himself explaining human emotions he'd always found difficult to process, let alone articulate. Being flustered. He tried to explain one cycle, after he'd nearly dropped a vital navigation chip, when she'd surprised him with a particularly radiant smile, is like your internal processor suddenly getting too many inputs it can't categorize. It's embarrassing. Lyra tilted her head, a soft, teal light pulsing rhythmically on her temples. Embarrassing. Is it a failure of the system? No. Kael chuckled, feeling the familiar heat rise in his cheeks. Not a failure, just an overload, usually caused by someone like you. The admission slipped out before he could stop it. Lyra's smile widened, the teal light warming to a gentle gold. I overload you, Kael. There was a playful lilt to her voice, a new confidence that had blossomed since their escape. Frequently, he admitted, his heart doing a strange flip. One evening, as they drifted through a quiet sector, waiting for the nav computer to calculate their next jump, Lyra was gazing out at a vibrant, star-dusted nebula. The ambient light from the celestial display cast her in silhouette, the patterns on her skin glowing softly. It is beautiful, she murmured, her voice laced with a wistful longing. My home world, it had skies like this. Before the Kryll, Kael moved to stand beside her, their shoulders brushing. Tell me about it, he said softly, and she did. She spoke of a world teeming with life, of symbiotic relationships between flora and fauna, of Florans who lived in harmony with their planet, their senses attuned to its every breath. She described cities grown from living wood, energies drawn from geothermal vents and solar winds, a society built on understanding and interconnectedness. The Kashal, she explained, was a sacred part of this, a way to connect not just with other sentient beings, but with the very spirit of their world. As she spoke, Kael felt a profound ache for what had been lost, and a burning anger at the Kryll for their destructive, homogenizing conquest. He reached for her hand, his fingers gently closing around hers. Her skin was warm, the intricate patterns pulsing faintly beneath his touch. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers curled around his, her grip surprisingly strong. Kael, she said, turning to face him, her luminous eyes searching his. You are unlike any I have known. You see the hidden paths, the broken pieces, and you mend them. Or find a new way. I'm just an informant, Lyra, he said, a hint of his old self-deprecation creeping in. A survivor. You are more. She insisted, her free hand coming up to gently touch his cheek. Her touch was feather light, yet it sent a jolt through him. The skin of her palm was incredibly soft, and he could feel the faint, rhythmic hum of her internal energy. You are a kind. In a galaxy that is often not. He leaned into her touch, his own hand rising to cover hers. The air between them crackled with an unspoken intensity. His analytical mind, usually so dominant, was silent, overwhelmed by the raw, powerful emotion that surged through him. He saw his own reflection in her vast, dark pupils, and in them he saw a future he hadn't dared to imagine. Lyra, he breathed, his voice husky. When this is over, if we make it, we'll make it, she said, her voice filled with a conviction that mirrored his own. The patterns on her cheeks glowed with a soft, roseate hue, a color he was beginning to associate with deep affection. And then, he didn't need her to finish the sentence. He bent his head and she met him halfway, her lips, surprisingly soft and warm, pressing against his. The kiss was hesitant at first, a discovery, then deepened, a fusion of two souls from different stars, bound by shared danger, and a love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of circumstances. Her unique biology made the kiss an experience unlike anything Kael had ever known. He could feel the faint thrum of her energy, taste the subtle, floral essence of her, and see, even with his eyes closed, the kaleidoscope of soft, loving colors that seemed to emanate from her very being. It was a kiss that spoke of hope, of defiance, and of a new life they would fight to build together. Their journey to Corsair's nebula was fraught with peril. Kryll patrols were more frequent, their nets tightening. The Void Serpent was a constant, terrifying presence on the long-range sensors, a colossal shadow blocking major hyperlanes, its psionic aura a palpable wave of dread, that even Kael could feel as a cold pressure at the back of his skull. Lyra described it as a scream in the silence, a constant assault on her heightened senses. They were forced to take longer, more dangerous routes through uncharted space and pirate-infested territories. During one close encounter with a Kryll destroyer, they had to execute an emergency hyperjump into an unstable, uncharted region. The Starhopper was battered, its systems failing. They crash-landed, again, this time on a jungle moon teeming with hostile fauna and an atmosphere barely breathable for Kael. Lyra, however, thrived. Her Floran physiology was more at home here than in the sterile confines of a starship. She identified edible plants, her proprioception warned them of hidden predators, and her G-force tolerance allowed her to navigate the treacherous, vine-choked terrain with an agility that left Kael breathless. It was here, amidst the lush, alien jungle, that Lyra's understanding of the Kael truly began to awaken. She found she could subtly influence the behavior of the less aggressive creatures, not by controlling them, but by projecting calm, by understanding their fear and responding to it. She camouflaged them from a pack of apex predators by mimicking the scent and thermal signature of the surrounding foliage, her skin patterns shifting to perfectly match the dappled sunlight and leaves. Kael watched in awe as she seemed to melt into the environment, becoming an extension of the jungle itself. The Mask of 1,000 Faces was not just about mimicking sentience. It was about understanding and harmonizing with life in all its forms. This deeper connection to her abilities also intensified her understanding of the message of hope she carried. It wasn't just data, it was a living song, a resonant frequency tied to the very fabric of Floran consciousness, designed to awaken and heal. She began to hum fragments of its strange, beautiful melodies that seemed to make the very air around them vibrate with a subtle energy. Kael found the tunes both haunting and uplifting. Their romantic connection, solidified by their kiss, deepened into a profound partnership. They moved as one, anticipated each other's needs, Kael's analytical mind and Lyra's intuitive senses, complementing each other perfectly. He learned to trust her instincts implicitly, even when they defied logic. She, in turn, relied on his ability to see the bigger picture, to strategize their way out of seemingly impossible situations. His initial flustered reactions to her had transformed into a comfortable intimacy, though he still occasionally blushed when her straightforward affection caught him off guard. "Your heart rhythm quickens when I am near, Kael," she observed one cycle, her head resting on his shoulder as they hid from a storm in a bioluminescent cave. "It is a pleasing sound." Kael just squeezed her hand, a smile playing on his lips. "Pleasingly analytical of you to notice, Lyra." After weeks of harrowing travel, they finally reached Corsair's Nebula, a chaotic, vibrant expanse of space known as a haven for smugglers, pirates, and those fleeing the established powers. Their contact was a grizzled, cybernetically enhanced information broker named Xylos, operating out of a disguised asteroid station called the Shard. Xylos was initially skeptical. "Vance, heard you were dust, and you bring this." He gestured towards Lyra, his optical sensors whirring. "The Kryll are offering a king's ransom for her. The Void Serpent itself is practically camped on the Epsilon 9 hyperlane. She carries the key to breaking Kryll conditioning." Kael stated, his voice level, projecting a confidence he didn't entirely feel. "A message of hope. We need to get it to the oppressed worlds." Xylos studied Lyra, who met his gaze unflinchingly, her own eyes glowing with a calm, steady light. "A message of hope, eh? Haven't heard that phrase in a long time. Most just whisper of despair these days." He grunted. "The Kryll have something called the Heart of Whispers. It's their central archive, on their command station, Aegis Prime, heavily fortified. Some say it's where they store the source code for their conditioning programs, a kind galt-damned doomsday device for free thought. If this message of yours is real and can counteract it, that's where the fight needs to go. But Aegis Prime is a fortress within a fortress, and the Serpent guards it like its own soul." Lyra spoke, her voice clear and resonant. "The message I carry is a song, a Floran song of awakening. It must be broadcast. From a place of power. A place like their Heart of Whispers. It can resonate through their networks, if the core systems are accessed." Xylos raised a metallic eyebrow. "Broadcast a song from the Kryll's central archive. That's not just bold, girl, that's certifiably insane. But I like insane, especially when it's aimed at the Kryll." He grinned, a flash of gold teeth. "I know a way to get you onto Aegis Prime. It involves the Mask of 1,000 Faces, or rather, your unique take on it. And you, Vance, will need all your unconventional thinking to handle the tech side. The archive isn't just a vault. It's a digital labyrinth, guarded by their most advanced AI. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. Aegis Prime was a colossal space station, the nerve center of Kryll operations in several sectors, bristling with defenses. The Heart of Whispers was located deep within its most secure sector, a high-security vault that was part museum of Kryll dominance, part archive of subjugated cultures, and part control center for their psycho-social manipulation network. Lyra would use her fully realized Kael to infiltrate Aegis Prime, not by disguising herself as a low-level grunt, but as a high-ranking Kryll dignitary, a praetor named Valerius, known for his infrequent, unannounced inspections. Xylos had detailed psych profiles and biometric data on Valerius, a reclusive and arrogant official whose paranoia made his erratic behavior plausible. Lyra studied the data, her skin pattern shifting as she absorbed his posture, his vocal cadences, even Kael suspected, his arrogant disdain. It was unsettling to watch her transform, her features subtly reshaping, her voice deepening into Valerius's dismissive baritone. The mask was more than just skin deep. It was a complete immersion. Kael's role was to accompany her, disguised as Valerius's new, unassuming technical aide. He would use his skills to bypass internal security systems, create diversions, and ultimately help Lyra access the core broadcast system within the heart of Whispers. Xylos provided them with stolen Kryll uniforms, forged credentials, and a wealth of technical schematics for Aegis Prime. The Void Serpent is the ultimate guardian. Xylos warned them as they prepared to depart on a cloaked shuttle he'd procured. It's psychically linked to Aegis Prime's core defenses. If you trigger a major alarm in the heart of Whispers, the Serpent will know. And it will come. Its arrival means game over. As their shuttle, disguised as a Kryll diplomatic transport, approached Aegis Prime, Kael felt a knot of anxiety tighten in his stomach. The station was immense, a city in space, surrounded by a fleet of warships. He glanced at Lyra, now fully embodying Praetor Valerius. Her transformation was flawless, down to the arrogant tilt of her chin and the dismissive wave of her hand. Only her eyes, when they briefly met his, held a flicker of the gentle, luminous Floran he loved. Nervous aide, Valerius drawled, his voice pure Kryll condescension. Kael, playing his part, bowed his head slightly. Merely anticipating the complexities of your inspection, Praetor. His heart hammered against his ribs. Easily flustered was an understatement. They passed through multiple security checkpoints. Lyra's performance as Valerius impeccable. Her dislike of chaotic environments was ironically an asset here. The rigid, oppressive order of the Kryll station seemed to suit her borrowed persona. Her proprioception allowed her to navigate the station's labyrinthine corridors with an unnatural confidence, sensing the flow of personnel and the hum of hidden systems. Kael, meanwhile, subtly scanned for vulnerabilities, his analytical mind working at triple speed. The heart of Whispers was even more imposing than Xylos had described. A vast, cathedral-like chamber, its walls lined with data stacks containing the cultural memories of 100 conquered worlds, all twisted and recontextualized to reinforce Kryll superiority. In the center, a colossal crystalline structure pulsed with a cold, blue light, the core of the Kryll's mental conditioning network. This was their target. Impressive, isn't it, Aide?